I grew up in Sweden. I am Swedish. But as soon as I was old enough to leave, when I was 20 actually, I left Sweden. I moved to England, where in my pursuit of education, I found something much more magical. I found my voice as a Black woman. I found representation in society. Now, I stayed in England for about 10 years, studying and working, and I decided to return to Sweden 10 years later, in 2013. And when I came back to Sweden, I found the same situation that caused me to leave to begin with. The silencing of my voice as a Black woman and the lack of representation. What was different this time, however, was that I was old enough and confident enough to say no. I will exercise my basic right as a human being of any color, which is freedom of speech and a platform to be heard. And since there was nowhere in society to find it, I took the initiative to create what is now Scandinavia's largest separatist group for Black women, men, and non-gender binaries. Now, this forum is a forum of Afro-Swedes, but it's also a forum of Afro-Scandinavians. It's a family. We uplift each other. We give each other a platform to share our experiences in a world that denies us that. It also led to me writing Europe's first makeup book for Black women, as you can tell. But I noticed there was an issue when this forum was the only place we could share our views. I needed to build a bridge into a white world where people could hear and listen to our thoughts. And that led me to obviously creating an Instagram profile, which is the largest social media site in present time, so that people who were not Black, because the forum's closed, could also understand what we were thinking, what we were feeling. Now, I also travel and hold lectures all around Sweden, especially with the young people, the youths, because I have realized that change is not something we can force upon anybody. It's something the person must be open to from the inside. And that initiative, that forum, that platform is what led me to be standing here today. Now, when you look at Sweden from the outside, and this is for Swedes and non-Swedes as well, you would think Sweden only had Black people, white people actually. I wish it was, somewhere in between. But you would think Sweden is absolutely 100% or 99% all white. Now, it might be very surprising to many people to know that out of the 10 million people in Sweden, 20.1% of them have foreign origins. That's 20.1% that stand outside of this white norm that we see everywhere. And an ironic fact is that the Sami people, who are the native indigenous Swedes, are included in that figure. Imagine that. I wonder how that conversation would have worked if there was a Sami voice doing that percentage count. Would they allow themselves to be classed as foreigners in a country they are natives to, or not? Now, out of that 2 million, you have 200,000 Afro-Swedes that are people directly descending from the continent of Africa. And that is stated in the report written by Victoria Kawesa, Tobias Hübinette, and Samson Bashir, released 2014, called the Afrophobia Report. Strange name, Afrophobia. Yet media representation, TV, magazines, editors, photographers, everywhere you turn, what do you see? White. And the magazine covers are also blindingly white, even though we have 12 months of the year every single month it's white. But the demographic and reality is very different. We know that. And again, when you look at any front runners of any activism in Sweden, whether it's Black Lives, whether it's feminism, they're all fronted by white voices. The beauty industry makes out that 99.9% of their clients are all white. It's gone so far that the word nude and normal skin tone is synonymous with having white skin. But again, the demographics of Sweden do not look like that. What is the effect of that? And let's divide that into two parts, the effect for the individuals, but also the effect for society. Have you ever been in a room and looked around and thought, where's somebody that looks like me? Or maybe you are in that room and somebody said, there's nobody that looks like me. And do you listen carefully once they say that? How many voices come up with all these excuses? Nobody applied. They don't work in this industry. All excuses from people who have taken for granted that they're always represented and their voices are always heard. And one thing that's very worrying is the fact that the lack of voice, the silencing of people, is very normalized. It's so normalized, we never notice it anymore. And even when we get a chance at being represented, we get represented via racial stereotypes. Everybody is used to them by now. We know the lazy immigrant, we know the black criminal, and we know the angry black woman. But I am not an angry black woman. I'm a happy one. There is a danger living in a society where, on surface level, what seems to be the majority control the minority views and what is being portrayed outwards. In fact, in 2011 in the US, Indiana University did a study where they looked at society and looked at the impact of how negative perceptions of minorities actually affects the entire society. And you may be surprised to know that it affects every single child, every single youth, except one group. And that group was young white males. And it makes you think, of course it would affect them very least, because superheroes, generally white, scientists, generally white, happy people, generally white. It's not because they have superhuman strength to actually withstand negativity from society. It's because they have positive affirmations of themselves. Young white boys can be anything because they can look anywhere and see themselves represented, which is great, but everybody would like that chance too. Now, let's talk about the effect on society. By silencing certain voices, some people may think it's not a big deal, but society loses out. We lose out on valuable insight that could improve society. Because the same people that are being silenced are the same people that contribute day in and day out to the same society, either via their workplace, paying taxes, which we love in Sweden very, very much, very, very high. But we do it because we live in this country and we love it and we want to contribute in the best way possible. Now, another effect is, if you contribute and you're being silenced, society may take a direction that nobody wants, whether they're white, black, or brown. Let's take an example of USA. There's a really big guy, kind of orange, sitting in power. We can call him Trumpet. And during election, 94% of black women voted against him. No one listened. No one gave them a platform to explain and talk about what fears they had and why they saw this being such a bad decision. Now I ask myself, what would have happened if we listened to them, got their views? Would society be better now, in present day? I believe so. but because they lacked and were silenced. We are where we are, with rising sales of self-tanner. The same happens here in Sweden. I know we love to think it doesn't, but Black people, whether it's in politics or art or music, are constantly being silenced. Let's take Black politicians, for examples. Black women politicians are always silenced, pushed out of rooms that their voice would have made a great impact. Black male politicians are found burnt to death in their cars, and we call it suicide because, again, media decides what we know and what we should think. By denying them their voices and not being susceptible to it, the biggest loser is not really the individual always, it's society as a whole. Now, as sad as reality is, I'm a positive person and a happy one, and I like to pose you solutions. I like to think we're a team, no matter what our skin color is. So I'm going to take the last part of this and say, how can we work together to tackle the invisibility of the most vulnerable and the marginalized? How do you question your daily life to see whose voices you're allowing into your home and into your mind? My grandmother, may she rest in peace, once said to me when I was 11, Levesque, no human being is born hating another simply because of the color of their skin or where they come from. And it didn't make sense at the time because I hadn't moved to Sweden yet. She was right. Hatred, neutrality are all things that are taught to us, either by society or in our homes. And for change to happen, every individual has to understand that the structures that silence certain voices are based on white supremacy. And this systematic silencing of voices is just that, a system. And we all know if we build systems, we can also break them down. And I know it's uncomfortable to say the next part because, well, it's the elephant in the room that everybody sees. We know, we see it, but nobody wants to accept it. White privilege. Because it's never pleasant to hear or feel shame for one's own participation in oppression. But to acknowledge that privilege, I feel, is that magical key. You're being given a key to finding places in your daily life where you can shed light on voices being silenced. We can only make change if we challenge our own problematic ideas and ideologies. There's still a chance for us to live up to this magnificent dream and image that Sweden is a place, a country, where we accept people of all cultures, ethnicities, gender identifications. That amazing Sweden. There's still a chance for us to create that together. Instead of using our differences on surface level to create a further divide and polarization in our communities, our schools, and our workplaces, we can start to look beyond even the empty rhetorics of our politicians who use that polarization and division to gain votes. But at the end of the day, they do not care as much about the regular Swedish person, whether you're white, black, or brown. So let me just finish off by giving you 5 areas in your life that you can leave here today and take with you and make a difference in society. The first one is, obviously, politics. Are you voting in your local elections, your municipality elections? Are you questioning the candidates you're voting for, what their views are on human rights? Are you reading the mandates of the political parties you support? Do they believe in human rights for all or just for some? In schools, are you reading the textbooks that your children bring home? Do they teach Black history? Do they bring up names of Latin, Asian, African people that have made a difference in the society we now live in today? Or are they being silenced? In the workplace, does your company employ with diversity in mind? What are their policies in place? And here I must give you a caveat. Do not leave it up to the few minorities in your workplace to make the complaint or to bring up these points, because we already know your voice holds so much more power than theirs. So rally up your colleagues and pose the important questions. Your money. Where are you spending your money? Do you support minority-owned companies? Do you support companies that exclude a huge amount of society from their product range? Do you boycott companies that have shown time and time again that they have racist ideologies? Do you buy with companies that have proven to be discriminatory against their clients and their employees? Those are questions. Where do you buy your art? Do you buy art from Black artists, from minority artists, from marginalized people, art that you love? Or do you buy art from white artists simply because you identify with them, even when they appropriate art from Black people? At home, this is very important. Do you talk about ethnicity at the dinner table? Do you talk about white privilege if your children are white? Do you talk about situations in society where you may witness or be discriminated against? Because these conversations are conversations that minorities, such as even myself, cannot avoid to not have with their children, because we know what's awaiting out there. So I believe everybody should have those conversations at home. Even on social media, who are you following? Is your timeline very much people that look like you, or diversified so that you may glimpse into the world of other people who might change your perspective on things? I just want to leave you with one thing. The change starts with you, and everywhere you go thereafter. In your home, in your workplace, at the gym, where I'm never at. If we want change, we need to start at the root by dismantling structures that perhaps even our ancestors have put in place. Because if you can influence your world, your own inner world, and the people closest to you, what we call närmiljö in Sweden, you might even influence the world. So the next time you turn on your television and you see 5 white men in suits discussing the issues with immigration, ask yourself, whose voice is being left out? Where is that immigrant that came to Sweden that actually worked all their lives for their children, for the country? Where is that voice? The voice of people like my mother. Question it. And thank you for giving me a voice today.